Alright, what's going on everyone? Today we're looking at another World Championship winning deck in Magic the Gathering's history, and this time it's Izzet Lessons, the deck that won the championship in 2025. Standard at the time was absolutely massive, containing 3 years of sets with 5 to 6 sets per year. Normally I name all the sets. Do I really want to do it for this year? I guess I will. So there was Wilds of Eldraine, Lost Caverns of Ixalan, Murders at Karlov Manor, Outlaws of Thunder Junction, Bloomburrow, Duskmourn, Foundations, Ether Drift, Tarkir Dragonstorm, Final Fantasy. By the way, this is the first World Championship with Universes Beyond in the format, but there's also Edge of Eternities, Spider-Man, and Avatar. That is a lot of sets, and Standard will not rotate until 2027, meaning all of these sets will be legal in the 2026 World Championship, plus 7 more sets. It's insane. So anyway, the tournament would take place in Bellevue, Washington, right outside Wizards of the Coast headquarters, and it would be won by Seth Manfield, his second time winning the World Championship. The first was exactly 10 years prior in 2015 with Abzan Control. In 2025, however, he played a deck that was not popular before the World Championship. In fact, it was largely built around the newest set, which was Avatar, and that deck would be, as we mentioned, Izzet Lessons. So the key cards actually aren't from Avatar, but we'll get to that. They're Monument to Endurance and Artist Talent. These are the reason to play the deck. So the Monument has 3 abilities that you can pick from whenever you discard a card. You can draw a card, so if something causes you to discard, you can redraw, you can create a treasure, more mana, or you can make the opponent lose 3, and you get to pick each once per turn. But you get to pick each one if you discard 3 cards. The talent says whenever you cast a non-creature, discard a card and draw a card. So if you were to say cast a burn spell, for example, talent would trigger, you draw discards, you don't lose cards, right? You break even, you discard something, you draw another card, but that would trigger the Monument, which would let you draw an extra card, get more mana, make the opponent lose 3, right? So this combination allowed the player to cycle through huge portions of their deck while draining the opponent out with the Monument. And keep in mind, it's not legendary, by the way, so you can have multiples, meaning you can get each ability twice. You can draw 2, make 2 treasures, lose 6, not legendary. Artist Talent can also make your non-creatures cheaper, including the Monument, and the final ability will add extra damage when you deal non-combat damage, which is not the reason to play the card, but it's relevant because the deck is filled with creature burn spells, which we'll look at in a little bit. Another win condition for this deck was Storm Chaser's Talent. When you play it, you make a 1/1 with prowess, then you can level it up to return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Very relevant. This deck was, it had one creature. The entire deck is spells, so definitely relevant in this deck. And the final ability is game breaking for sure if you can get there, but it's not usually why the card was played. But basically every single instant and sorcery you play makes another prowess otter, which is kind of crazy. But again, that's like a Planeswalker ultimate, right? It's there, but you're usually playing it for the first 2 abilities. And the deck also combines Storm Chaser's Talent with Boomerang Basics. It can return a non-land permanent to hand. Your opponent's yours, doesn't matter. And if you target your own permanent, you get to draw a card. This means you can return the talent, that being the Storm Chaser's Talent, and replay it for another otter. You can play a talent, get an otter, then play Boomerang Basics, return it to hand, which will trigger the prowess on the first otter, replay the talent, also draw a card, don't forget that, and make another otter. At that point, your first otter is a 3/3, you have a second otter, and you get to draw a card. And then you can level the Storm Chaser's Talent up for 4 mana and return the Boomerang Basics back to your hand from your graveyard, and then cycle it again, right? So that's sort of a loop you can do to just draw a bunch of cards if necessary. So you can see the amazing card selection and draw this deck had. Monument can draw, make mana, drain the opponent out. Artist Talent lets you filter every single time you play basically anything in this deck. Storm Chaser's Talent gave you an army of powerful prowess less otters to be down with, and it also gave you a lot of card advantage from the graveyard. And that brings us to the spells, and specifically the lessons. Now, in the past, lessons were tied to the learn mechanic. This is from original Strixhaven, where a learn card could pull a lesson from the sideboard. And so the way these were balanced is that the learn cards were usually pretty good, but the lessons were very weak because they were kind of like free cards you could get, right? But in the Avatar set, the lessons were just a card type. They didn't synergize with anything other than other lesson cards. As an example, this isn't in the deck, but Dragonfly Swarm, if you have lessons in your graveyard, will draw a card when it dies, right? So there's lesson synergy, but no learn mechanic in Avatar, but still very relevant as we'll see. So let's talk about lessons. We have Firebending Lesson, Combustion Technique, Eros Demonstration. The first is 1 mana, deal 2 to a creature, or kick it for 5 mana total for kicker +1 to deal 5. So 1 for 2 damage or 5 for 5. Combustion Technique deals 2 damage plus the number of lessons in your graveyard. Most of the deck is lessons, so it's usually like 2 mana, deal 5, 7, 10, who knows. Basically 2 mana, kill something, and it's a lesson. And the demonstration is either going to deal 4 damage to a creature or 1 damage to all of your opponent's creatures. So if your opponent's going wide, you can wipe it, or 2 mana, deal 4 to a creature, still totally fine. And once again, it is a lesson. So in addition to these, we have the aforementioned Boomerang Basics, as well as Eloquentia and Abandon Attachments. The first we already talked about, Bounce Spell, draws cards if you bounce your own things. Eloquentia is literally just quench. It's quench, but avatar pilled, so it's Eloquentia. It's a pretty bad counterspell. Quench was never that great, but it's a lesson that's important. And then we have Abandon Attachments, which is 2 mana, discard 1, draw 2. So ultimately, you spend this card, you discard a card, you draw 2, you break even, but it's a lesson, so it goes to the graveyard. You can discard another lesson and then draw 2 more cards, which can really fill your graveyard up with lessons, as well as it synergizes with Monument by letting you discard. Now, you might be thinking that all of these lessons seem pretty medium. They're like kind of bad to medium. I mean, some of the burn spells are decent, but the quench and stuff is pretty bad. Why are you loading your deck with so many creature burn spells like this? Like, you wouldn't normally play this many creature removal spells as burn spells at the World Championship, no less. That's kind of crazy, but the reason it did this, there was one final lesson, and that is Accumulate Wisdom, which is quite a card. It is 2 mana. Look at the top 3. You get to pick 1, put into your hand. That is not very good. It is Anticipate. Anticipate, not a competitive card, but that's the low end. That's the floor. The ceiling is if you have 3 lessons in your graveyard, which with all the draw and discard you've seen, not a problem in the slightest, then you just get to put all 3 cards in your hand. That is 2 mana, draw 3. And not only that, guys, we talked earlier about the talent. It makes your non-creatures cost 1 less, meaning this is 1 mana, draw 3. This is literally Ancestral Recall in Standard. Ancestral Recall, if you don't know, is part of the Power 9, the 9 most powerful Magic cards printed in the early days of the game, and it is banned everywhere. You cannot play Ancestral Recall except in Vintage, the most powerful format in the game, where it's restricted to 1 copy. At most, in Magic the Gathering, you can play 1 copy of Ancestral Recall, and right here in Standard, it was very easy to pay 1 and draw 3. You got to play Ancestral Recall in Standard. Yes, it's not the same, it takes some work, but we've seen this deck draws and discards so much, it has so many lessons, that it was regularly 1 mana, draw 3 cards, which is crazy for Standard, especially since the deck also had Gran, which is the only creature in the deck. It is a 1 mana 1/2. It draws and discards when it becomes tapped, so you can play it on turn 1, attack, turn 2, draw, discard. More synergy with the Monument, of course. That discard will trigger the Monument. More filtering, so you can discard lessons to make your Accumulate Wisdom draw 3. And much like Artist Talent, it will make your non-creatures cost 1 less. So not only does that make all your stuff cheaper, but once again, makes that Accumulate Wisdom turn into an Ancestral Recall like it's nothing. So the deck was full of damage-based creature removal, which can be unreliable if you play against blue-white control. All of that's dead, doesn't do anything. It played objectively bad counter spells, all because it got to play Ancestral Recall and Standard, and it was so good at filtering that if you got flooded with creature removal against a control deck, you could just ditch it into the graveyard pretty easily. So yeah, just an Ancestral Recall and a bunch of control spells. That was the deck. For lands, it had Multiversal Passage, Spire Bluff Canal, and River Pyre Verge for dual lands. The passage is basically a shock land for any color. You pay 2 life, pick a color, and it's that color. The canal is a fast land, enters untapped early, tapped late, and the Verge only taps for red unless you control an island or a mountain, then it taps for both. And note that the passage, when you pick a color, it becomes that land type. It also had Agnicella, which can draw and discard, perfect for this deck, and it played a pile of basics. We don't go super in depth when it comes to sideboards in these videos, but the deck had access to Annul, Spell Pierce, and Negate, which are all counter spells for specific decks. For spot removal, it had Torch the Tower, Abrade, and Broadside Barrage. It had Soul Guide Lantern for graveyards and Pyroclasm as a board wipe for aggro decks. It had 2 copies of Quantum Riddler as an extra top-end threat, and it had extra copies of Abandoned Attachments, Eros Demonstration, and Eloquentia, so you could adjust those ratios after sideboarding. And that is Izzet Lessons, which was basically just Izzet control. It had burn, it had counter, it had bounce, but it just drained you out with a Monument of Endurance while also outdrawing you. It played questionable removal, but it did that because it had access to a Power 9 card in Standard basically, and the deck was incredibly good at just having what it needed at any particular time. This deck was so good at seeing so much of its deck. Between all the filtering, all the drawing, this deck could find what it needed at any time, and because of that, it won the World Championship in 2025. And that's it. That is Izzet Lessons. If you like this video and want to see more like it, I do have an entire playlist dedicated to these decks, these World Championship decks, and I'll leave a link to it in the description below, though I do warn you that they're several years old and pretty low quality. I do sometimes wonder if I should just redo the entire series. Anyone want to see an update? I don't know, but either way, I hope this video was interesting at least. Leave a like if it was, and yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next one.